Happy Monday to everybody. We are here. I've been waiting all since I've been thinking about this to do this. Took a couple weeks to get all the information that I wanted together. And then it took a real humbling moment the other day, maybe 2 or 3 days ago, to realize that I couldn't do everything all at once. So I'm going to do 3 parts for sure. And there may be 2 additional parts to follow up with this. But White Heaven, the Great White Hope, and Black Despair. We're going to touch first on what creates the atmosphere for what I'm talking about. Because when I hear something like that, like I'm always objective to myself. And I say, well, if somebody were to hear the term white heaven, they might just think that, you're some black guy who's just talking about white supremacy. And no, I'm if I felt like that was the case, I would say that. But that's not what I believe. That's not what I envision in my mind. I envision an atmosphere, an environment that people of a certain descendancy and people of certain like tendencies have been able to thrive in this environment that I call white heaven. Now, the White Hope is here. Got several pages pulled up. We're gonna first go over what is called the brief history of Jim Crow. And we're going to start there. People like to get carried away with all what these things are. But the easiest way for me is just to show you, give you a brief understudy like I've given myself. And then we will overview the information in whole. Now, what my point is this right here is that Jim Crow was not a finger part of the fist. No, Jim Crow was its own fist that hampered black people. So when I point out all these different things, not one of them are fingers. They're all fists. Okay, so it's going to be a barrage of fists that are bombarding the black man all at once. And if you overlook the time periods as these events overlap with one another, then you will miss what is white heaven. You will not realize that you are probably in one of the environments that was set up for them in particular to thrive in. And when I say thrive, I mean thrive. Now let's just read this. A brief history of Jim Crow. And I'll copy this link and put it in the comment section when I get done with all this. I can ride in first-class cars on the railroads and in streets, wrote journalist T. McCants Stewart. I can stop in and drink a glass of soda and be more politely waited on in some parts of New England. Perhaps Stewart's comments don't seem newsworthy. Consider that he was reporting from South Carolina in 1885 and he was black. Now, we will get to talk about Plessy versus Ferguson in a little bit, because this is the case that pretty much set the atmosphere, the tone, if you will, for the Jim Crow days. I'm going to explain it the best that I can, because, like I said, there's different parts to this. So I'm not going to go over something that I already have planned for a different part, like sharecropping will be in the second part of this. Sharecropping will come up, but that's not going to be my focus. My focus for this one is the Jim Crow. And that's why it's, the Great White Hope and, Black Despair. And here we go again. Stewart had decided to tour the South because he feared for freedmen's liberties. Now understand, freedmen is a term that some people will argue is interchangeable with a free Negro slave, but freedmen are contendable or contingent with people that are aboriginal to the land and not blacks or not foreign blacks, the Negroes that were brought in. However, going forward, in 1868, with Amendment 14, the Constitution had finally given black men full citizenship and promised them equal protection under the law. Blacks voted won elected office, and served on juries. Stop right there. So the atmosphere right after slavery, right after the Civil War, was that blacks had taken full advantage of everything that had come their way. You understand? This is going to be part of the despair that black people suffer from. I also need you to recognize that there's a difference between a mulatto who has a white father and a black mother and a half breed, can you dig it, who has a black father and a white mother. Though you can call either one a mulatto, people will look at them differently. And the reason why is because many of these people who held these offices would have been of some of those uh, uh, genus classes. And that's not going to be pointed out here. So I need to caveat when I need to point these things out. However, 10 years later, federal troops withdrew from the South, returning it to local white rule. And now the Republican Party champion of Reconstruction and freedmen's rights had fallen from national power. Would black people's rights survive? They're talking about the Black Republican Party. After a few weeks on the road, Stewart decided that they would that after a few weeks on the road, Stewart decided they would. Now understand, this was in 1885 when he was believing all of this, okay? This is only 7 years into the enactment of Jim Crow. We need to understand the atmosphere that most places were separated already, but the Jim Crow gave way to making sure that blacks couldn't do this, couldn't vote, couldn't hold office or anything like that. Now, we're going to get to see the numbers later. We just need to give rise to what it is that Jim Crow actually allowed to happen. Listen, true terrorism against blacks. True terrorism against blacks. Lynching, rape, arson ran unchecked. True, many rural blacks lived under a sharecropping system, little better than slavery. But Stewart noted many signs of change. He saw a black policeman arrest a white criminal. He saw whites casually talk with black strangers. The morning light is breaking, he told his readers. Stewart was wrong. Over the next 20 years, blacks would lose almost all they had gained. Worse, denial of their rights and freedoms would be made legal by a series of racist statutes, the Jim Crow laws. Can you dig it? Denial of their rights and freedoms would be made legal by a series of racist statutes, the Jim Crow laws. Now understand, y'all, we're gonna break into who Jim Crow was in a little bit. It's a minstrel, but we'll get into that. Jim Crow was a derisive slang term for a man. It came to mean any state law passed in the South that established different rules for blacks and whites. Jim Crow laws were based on the theory of white supremacy and were a reaction to Reconstruction. In the Depression-racked 1890s, racism appealed to whites who feared losing their jobs to blacks. Politicians abused blacks to win votes of poor white crackers. Newspapers fed bias of white readers by paying up or sometimes even making up black crimes. Playing up, excuse me. In 1890, in spite of its 16 members, Louisiana General Assembly passed a law to prevent black and white people from riding together on railroads. Plessy versus Ferguson. And there's a more detailed outlining that we'll go over later about all this, but I just wanted you to see it now. Plessy versus Ferguson is a case challenging the law, reached the U.S. Supreme Court in 1896. Upholding the law, the court and the public said the public facilities for blacks and whites could be separate but equal. Soon throughout the South, they had to be separate. 2 years later, the court seemed to seal the fate of black Americans when it upheld the Mississippi law designed to deny black men the vote. Given the green light, Southern states began to limit the voting right to those who owned property or could read well, to those whose grandfathers had been able to vote, to those with good characters. to those who paid poll taxes. In 1896, Louisiana had 130,334 registered black voters. 8 years later, only 1,342, 1%, could pass the state's new rules, and those were more than likely the white people. Right on. They had white daddies, not black daddies, but white daddies and black mamas. Jim Crow's laws touched every part of life in South Carolina. Black and white textile workers could not work in the same room, enter the same door, or gaze out of the same window. Many industries would hire blacks. Many unions passed rules to exclude them. In Richmond, one could not live on the street unless most of the residents were one people could marry. One could not marry someone of a different race. By 1914, Texas had 6 entire towns in which blacks could not live. Mobile passed the Jim Crow curfew. Blacks could not leave their homes after 10 p.m. Signs marked whites only or colored hung over doors. Ticket windows and drinking fountains. Georgia had black and white parks. Oklahoma had black and white phone booths. Prisons and hospitals, orphanages were segregated, as were schools and colleges. In North Carolina, a black and white student had to use separate sets of textbooks. In Florida, the books couldn't even be stored together. Atlanta courts kept the 2 Bibles, one for black witnesses and one for whites. Virginia told fraternal social groups that black and white members could not address each other as brother. Though seemingly rigid and complete, Jim Crow laws did not account for all of the discrimination blacks suffered. Unwritten rules barred blacks from white jobs in New York and kept them out of white stores in Los Angeles. Humiliation was about the best treatment blacks who broke such rules could hope for. Stop right there. What they're indicating right now is that you did not have to live in the South to be treated like dirt. Understand, y'all. Now, this is white fucking heaven at its finest. I'm going to keep reading because I need y'all to really, take it all in. This is a little bit. This is just me going over the stuff that I've already read, and I'm just rereading it to you guys so that way you really get what I'm trying to say right now. And this is huge. White heaven has done nothing but told people lies. And when most people talk about Jim Crow, they won't actually read things like this about Jim Crow. They'll just be like, well, Jim Crow was bad for black people. They hung black people. They did this. They did that. Well, look, let's talk about the actual atmosphere. And then let's talk about how they use Jim Crow, which is not even the name of the actual laws. You got to understand. We'll go over what Jim Crow is in a minute, but it's a minstrel. It was a show that became a derogative racist show, and its derogative racist term became the letter of this law. Y'all really need to get it. However, we're going to really base it all down, and I'm going to keep reading. Humiliation was about the best treatment blacks who broke such rules could hope for. Groups like the Ku Klux Klan, which revived in 1915, used venom and violence to keep blacks in their place. More than 360,000 black men served in World War I. The country welcomed them home with 25 major race riots. Let me read that again. The country welcomed them home with 25 major race riots, the most serious in Chicago. White mobs lynched veterans in uniform. Black Americans fought back. The National Association for Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, founded in 1909, and the Urban League publicized abuses and worked for redress. You see what these cowards did? The blacks fought back, and then they created the NAACP was already around, Urban League also, but these guys, they were created for this type of purpose, to quell black people. You guys got to understand, in 1909 to 1920, which would have been, the real range of World War I, because there was a workup, and then if you ask other parts of the world, 1911, you could argue, was really like a point where in which a lot of the major fighting broke out before the assassination of the Tsar. However, let's just get back to the black people real quick. This law was forcing black people out of the South. It was pushing them hand over fist out of the South. Okay. One of the other things we're going to talk about is the Rockefeller projects, but we're going to get to that in the, within the hour or so. But we need to understand that these Rockefeller projects came up at a time where in which blacks had already suffered the brunt of the Jim Crow laws. You understand? And they were tired of it. But it just told you here, that these same blacks who were living in places as far west as Los Angeles, right on, and as far north as New York, were still treated lesser than. Now we're gonna go back, and I'm just gonna go ahead and hit it off. Though they drew support from both races, these groups barely stemmed the tide. The 19s, 20s, and 30s produced new Jim Crow laws. By 1944, a Swede visiting the South pronounced segregation so complete that whites did not see blacks except when being served by them. Are you hearing this? White dude was like, I came there, I didn't see any black people. None. Except for when I was being served by them. Like, they were a subservient class. And that's how they made it for black folks. But World War II changed America inside and out. The link between white supremacy and Hitler's master race could not be ignored. Jim Crow shocked United Nations delegates who reported home about the practice. Racial discrimination furnishes grist from the communist propaganda mills, said a government spokesman. It raises doubt even among friendly nations as the intensity of our devotion to the democratic faith. Right. Look, man, these dudes is over there. You got black troops fighting white dudes, but you had the Germans, not just the communists, but the Germans playing stuff like your own country hates you. They're going to let you die here in the field. You understand that? You see what I'm saying? Like, you guys got to really get like what they were doing to black people was reminding them, even if you beat our ass, even when you do beat our ass, you're still going to go home and get treated like the black dog you are. Anyway, let's keep it pushing. In 1948, President Harry Truman took decisive action to promote racial equality. He urged Congress to abolish the poll tax and for fair voting and hiring practices and end Jim Crow transportation between states. 4 southern states abandoned Truman's Democratic Party in protest. Then, as commander-in-chief, Truman ordered the complete integration of the armed forces. He did not wipe out racism, but trained to obey commands. Officers complied as best they could. In Korea during the 1950s, integrated U.S. forces fought their first war. That's bullshit. Anyway, man, there were black units attached to white dudes back in like the Revolutionary War. This is why you guys have to read this and understand, like, it's all a Jedi mind fuck. Okay, they purposely wanted black people to want to be around white people. Right on. All right. It was like a relationship gone sour. All of a sudden, you can't slap and kick the chick no more. You know what I'm saying? She told you she won out, and the judge gave her papers. But for some odd reason, the chick feels some type of way when she sees the dude around town, and the dude don't want to speak to her. As opposed to ignoring the abusive dude, she wants to talk to him and still be his friend and try to understand why he did what he did. And I'm like, yo, chick, he did what he did because he's like that and that's who he is. And as opposed to black people understanding this is who these white people are, right on, they want to be like a chick who was just in a horrible relationship and try to figure out why it is that you don't want me around. Good, you don't want me. I don't want to be around you. You follow me? They go so far as to lie about the participation with integrated forces of blacks and white. Man, if you guys think when bullets get to flying that people maintain their ranks and all that, it's complete chaos. Anyway, back at home, back to all the business. Back at home, When the new Eisenhower administration downplayed civil rights, federal courts took the lead. In 1950, the NAACP decided to challenge the concepts of separate but equal. Now, I want y'all to understand, this is part of the Jedi mindfuck. Fed up with poor, overcrowded schools, black parents in South Carolina and Virginia sued to get their children into white schools. Both times, federal courts upheld segregation. Both times, the parents appealed. Meanwhile, in a similar case, Delaware's Supreme Court ordered a district to admit black parents to white schools until adequate classrooms could be provided for blacks. This time, the district appealed. The Supreme Court agreed to consider these three cases in combination with one other. In Topeka, Kansas, where schools for blacks and whites were equally good, Oliver Brown wanted his 8-year-old daughter, Linda, to attend a school close to home. State law, however, prevented the white school from accepting Linda because she was black. On May 17, at the stroke of noon, the 9 Supreme Court justices announced their unanimous decision in the 4 cases, now grouped as Brown versus the Board of Education. They upheld that racial segregation of schools and public schools, even in schools of equality, hurt minority children. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. Wow. Do y'all understand that this shit makes no fucking sense? That makes no sense. The practice violated the Constitution's 14th Amendment and must stop. To some, the judgment seemed the fruitful end of a long struggle. The actual struggle had just begun. Thank you. Y'all, we're not even going to read these little questions because they're bullshit. I'm going to go and see what y'all talking about. And then I'm going to see what's popping. And we're going to move to the next thing. But understand, it's about to go down, okay? When I say this is white heaven, the great white hope, and black despair, that's just the beginning. You feel me? That's nothing. That's easy to do. That's easy to deal with. What's not easy to deal with is one moment, y'all. What's not easy to deal with is like how black people took the whole situation of, okay, we're about to be in the same schools as white people now. Now we're fine. Like everybody always thinks they made it. You know what I mean? Like, because they got their whole chicken and their loaf of bread and their a pitcher of ale. They think they made it, and it's like, you couldn't be more wrong as a black or a black man or woman. You couldn't be more wrong about it, and it's really sad. Give me one moment. Right now there's a lot going on, and let me greet everybody. Hello, everyone. How y'all doing? I hope this is really going to be helpful for people who watch it later. I'm talking about, who don't know us. This is really one of like the more complete works that I've gotten to do in a long time. So far, what I really need everybody to understand is that they don't like to talk about the actual fruit of the matter with Jim Crow. They don't like to give you exact instances. You have to look up things. But if we know anything about history, from the bombing of churches to the lynching of poor blacks to them beating, I'll answer that in a moment. Give me 1 second, sister. To the beatings of young men like Emmett Till, you have to ask yourself, how much of this is not white heaven? Now I understand. These were during a time where it was good and plenty. I could point out how they infested this opium epidemic. This heroin epidemic is not new. There was a heroin epidemic in the black community almost 100 years ago. It goes untalked about. It really goes untalked about. But a lot of the older drug addicts who were like in their 70s and 80s who are still alive, a lot of them did heroin. They didn't do cocaine. They did heroin for a long time. And anybody who's my parents' age or, you know, just older than me by at least 10 years knows that. You know what I'm saying? You know, anybody my age would have to have been around those kinds of people to know that. And that's the truth. But there was already a heroin epidemic in the Black community. This is why it hasn't struck Black people the same way as struck white people. You understand? Cocaine has probably killed more white people than it has Black people, realistically. But the fact that crack cocaine is only found in Black neighborhoods, by and part, you can victimize Black people. Now let's get to your question, and then let's get back to the information that I have to y'all. Eventually, it could shut down the EBT cards. Government funded housing, I think somehow they'll find a way to fix that. The EBT cards, though, they'll fix. Here's why. And one of the other things I want to talk to y'all about, right? One moment. And let me just get all my windows fixed because I got too many internet windows up. Alrighty. All right, here we go. This is all good. All right, so this is it. So it's I'm gonna delete the brief history of Jim Crow. And I have another one on the Britannica about the Jim Crow. We're gonna slowly work our way to that one. I want to read some of these about the social history welfare, but I will pull up the other one that I just had, and I will put that link and down there in the little super chat thing. And one moment. All right. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. The happy birthdays and all of it. I'm just not catching up. I'm slow on the draw right now, so please forgive me. I appreciate the happy birthdays. I really do. You know. There goes that link, y'all. Okay, that's to the first one that I read to you. This is going to be very interesting because now we're going to move to this other page, social welfare.library.vcu.edu. Oh my goodness. I haven't read all of these things, but I've read a lot of them. Oh, I lived. It's always epic when you make it. It is always nice when you make it. I won't even front. One moment. Okay, here we go. All right, share. Bam. Now, a part of this Black despair, right? I really need y'all to understand that they lie. You know, your despair is horrible. You know, letting you go to a school closer to your home isn't doing you any favors. And what the little girl did, right? What her father done is effectively allowed for white people to victimize Black people, right? And for other races of people to come in, right, and fester their way into the Black neighborhood and take it over. Now, of course, they couldn't see how a move like Brown versus Board of Education was such a huge thing in the civil rights movement that, you know, and everybody was all happy, lovey, you know, wanting to get along, but it's bullshit. Now, I need y'all to get something, okay? During Jim Crow, the Great Depression took place. But before the Great Depression, there was this 10-year period called the Roaring 20s or the Golden 20s or the Golden Age. Now, when Donald Trump says "Make America Great Again," he actually is talking about this period in America. Blacks were on heroin at an all-time record high. They were being forced out of the South into racist northern cities, forced out into the West to other racist cities. You know, you were pretty much being forced into the arms of the Klan. So now it wasn't it was no longer the country Klan, but now the city Klan that you had to be worried about. And the city Klan operated differently, you see. Now, I'm going to skip right through some of this. Because I'm not really worried about all this. I'm going to skip right to a part about Black people, okay? And it's amazing. African Americans and the Civil Conservation Corps. Now, a lot of people have probably never even heard of this. That's okay. That's all right. What is important is that this happened and it took place. All right. Approximately 250,000 youths have served in the Corps since President Roosevelt and the Congress initiated the Civilian Conservation Corps in 1933. Now understand, people who went here so that way they could get paid money. You understand? So that way they could get paid money and send it home. Let's go ahead and get it. Regular habits of work, training, discipline, fresh air, and 3 well-prepared and ample meals a day have combined to improve the health and morale of all enrollees. The gain in weight has ranged from 7 to 15 pounds for each boy. Let's go ahead and caveat real fast. That is a declaration to the poor eating that sharecroppers were forced under those harsh, crucial fucking Jim Crow laws that these people are arguing just years before were golden years. Let's go ahead and keep it pushing. 30,000 young colored men and war veterans, 1/10 of the total CCC enrollment, are actively participating in the Civilian Conservation Corps. They are engaged on work projects throughout the country and the Virgin Islands. Stop right there again. So this is why you have such an understanding with the Virgin Islands and Black people, because young Black men were going to the Virgin Islands way back then. Can you dig it? Before this, but it was being paid for, footed for by the government. Now, what it's not saying here is that this is 30,000 that went probably at one time during the initial offset, and 250,000 people did it while this program was in effect. Okay, now that's a lot of people. All right, you got to really understand that's a lot of people who went and decided I'd rather do something than nothing, or who may have been able to go and actually partaken in this program. Let's just keep on going. Let's go ahead and $700,000 a month for the past year has been allotted by the colored CCC boys to their parents and dependents back home. Stop right there. So this is money that they're earning, okay? They're not giving you anything. You're working, okay? You're working for every dollar that you get. They feed you because the only way you're going to keep working is if we feed you. 90,000 books have been supplied throughout the War Department and the Office of Education for colored camp libraries. Current magazines, daily and weekly newspapers are made available in camp recreation halls. 12,000 colored CCC enrollees in the past 5 years have completed courses in first aid through cooperation of the Civilian Conservation Corps and National Red Cross. 2,000 colored project assistant leaders and assistant leaders are on duty at the CCC campus. 600 colored cooks are steadily employed in the CCC mess hall. 900 classes in Negro history were conducted in the camps during the past 5 years. National Negro health exhibits have been shown for 5 consecutive years in cooperation with the U.S. Health Service. 800 colored boys have gained business training in the capacity of store clerks and managers of post exchanges in CCC camps. Now, let's just stop right there. If you guys look at the time that these people would have done these things, this happened after the Black Wall Street. So if you wonder why there was able to be a resurgence of Black businesses, okay, these were the sort of programs that those people went to, okay, as Black veterans who understood the need to get a foothold somewhere. I need the advantage in something, because if I get myself around the right people, maybe one of them will not pity me, but they will favor me, and I will get the opportunity that I need and I desire. This is what these Black people were doing. Okay, these dudes right here going here weren't mulatto boys and girls whose daddies had money and were like, we need the money, son. No, these were poor Blacks who needed this, who were going to go do these things, and they took advantage of the situation as it stood. Now, I have yet to hear of programs like these today that help out young black men. To this level. You can say Job Corps, but Job Corps ain't shit. I'm talking about something for young black men. 147 colored college graduates are serving the CCC campus as educational advisors. Those 147, I would question their lineage. 1,200 part-time experienced teachers are actively engaged in instruction in these colored enrollees at CCC camps. 25 colored medical reserve officers and chaplains of the U.S. Reserve Corps are active on duty in the nation's CCC camps. 106 colored CCC camps are located in forest parks, recreational areas, fish and game reservations, and on drainage and mosquito control projects. This is crazy. You see, they had them in areas where they could move around and do stuff and more or less live off the land. This is what I'm really getting. This is what I'm really understanding. Okay. 48 colored CCC companies are engaged on soil conservation projects. Let's talk about the Dust Bowl for half a second, because the Dust Bowl is going to be, you know, its own part. All the sharecropping of the Dust Bowl they merit and deserve their own. Just like this is getting, you know, talked about, because I'm going to get back to the Jim Crow, because all this is going on during the Jim Crow. Understand, a lot of these Blacks are going to these places to learn how to defend themselves against these racist white boys, right? You couldn't, the army wasn't integrated until when, y'all? Right, man. Can you dig it? 1950s. This is 20 years before the integration of the army. So if you wanted to get close to that sort of training without actually being a cook in the Navy or the Army or something like that, you had to. It was a must that you went and did this. Can you dig it? Right. Unless you were one of those Black people who were like, you got to go and put your ass on the line. There's no, look, Black people have shown that they can fight since they have been in this country, and they're going to do it until the day that they die. It's bullshit that Black men felt the need ever after the Revolutionary War, and they weren't given their freedom back then, to fucking keep fighting. I wouldn't have been fighting for a damn thing. These motherfuckers lied to me once. They're always going to lie. That would have been my mentality, and that's what I would have told my children, and that would have been something that was taught and ingrained. I don't give a fuck what the environment was. Excuse my language. 4 colored engineers, 6 colored technical foremen have served Pennsylvania camps for more than 2 years at Gettysburg. The camp superintendent is a Negro. Fisher's Landing, New York, 4 other line officers are active duty at these 2 camps. 1 colored historian who received his PhD from Columbia University is included at the camp personnel at Gettysburg. Once again, I unless I see you, I have to question who you are, right on, with these little numbers. You know what I'm talking about? Because more than likely, they were letting the mulattoes in at this point, you know. And if you're not a mulatto by trade, you're like a guy like, you know, like on my father's blood, you know, like on my father's bloodline, where there's a white woman. So that would have been his great-great-grandmother, right? So my father's great-grandmother was a white woman. You see what I'm talking about? So imagine the complexion of my father's father. You dig it? You know, because my dad is a light-skinned dude, you know. And he got woolly nigga hair and all that, but that's just me throwing it out there. So it's like, even when you look at it like that, still, I'm critical, you know. And I know you're like, damn, you vicious, but that's my personal way of being about it. I can't help it. One colored company in Ohio near the Taylorville Dam Carriers on the renowned Miami Conservation District, a flood control project started after the 1913 Dayton flood. One colored company has been engaged in the unique historic project at Williamsburg and Jamestown, Virginia. One colored company is located at the TVA site in Tennessee. 11,000 colored enrollees have been taught to read and write. More than 90% of the colored CCC's enrollees attend classes from elementary to college level, which are conducted in each camp's education building, which is well equipped and especially constructed for vocational instruction. Howard University, Wilberforce University, Tuskegee Institute, Hampton Institute, Florida A&M College at Tallahassee, Tennessee A&I State College, and a number of other Negro colleges have granted scholarships and fellowships to CCC enrollees. And the industry aid. The textile and food industries and the railroads have received orders for more than $33 million worth of supplies needed to run colored CCC camps. $15 million have been obligated for clothing worn by colored enrollees, including shirts, underwear, trousers, socks, denim jumpers, shoes, caps, raincoats, and overcoats. $19 million has been expended for food for served colored boys and men at camp during the past 6.5 years. $1.5 million has been received by railroads for transportation of colored CCC enrollees to camp and back home again. Colored men and boys' participation in the CCC. The Civilian Conservation Corps was established by President Roosevelt and Congress on April 5, 1933. Now stop right there. Why this is so important is because this is part of Black people's suffering. All right. There were no financial opportunities for Blacks. You need to understand this. If you moved up north, you were shining shoes. If you got real lucky, you got to work in somebody's like print press or something like that, right? Unless the skills that your forefathers had acquired during slavery survived the tumultuous first decade, 2 decades of what is known as Jim Crow, then those skills were lost. And you were just a Black man or a Black woman trying to make it, okay? A colored trying to make it. On my father's mother's birth certificate, there's a C for the letter, for the meaning colored, because she was born in Alabama, y'all. They apparently didn't call people Black back then when she was born in Alabama. They were still considered colored. Right on? D. However, we're going to keep reading about this old chump ass sucker right here, FDR, because I can only caveat so far and tell all of these things about white heaven. But one of the things about white heaven is that it's a capitalistic society. FDR, you could argue, was actually a socialist president. Everything that you're reading about is socialism. All this stuff is socialism. To just use the money to fund it, to hope that people are going to work and keep working, and it's going to create industry. These are the same young Black people whose grandfathers were inventors who had all their inventions stolen. These are the same Black people who watch white people steal the industries that they created and then run those industries into the ground for the lack of knowledge. And then those same white people have to stand in the fucking soup and bread lines and complain that they built the country, even though everybody knows that they didn't, which is why they had to stand in the soup lines in the first place. Let's go ahead and keep it pushing. Because while Black men were out here working at these CCC camps, okay, white men were too busy sitting on their ass trying to get a free meal. On the same day, the late Robert Fechner was named director was named director. James C. McKenty was now acting director of the CCC and had been assistant director since its inception. The purpose of the Civilian Conservation Corps was to relieve acute conditions of distress and unemployment in the United States and to provide for the restoration of the country's natural resources along the advancement of an orderly program of useful public works. In plain language, what it did was we got to put poor black people to work because this Jim Crow shit is going to keep them out of work. There's no other work that we can get them to do. And they were doing stuff that nobody else wanted to do. Okay? All right? They were cutting down the trees. They made some of these natural parkways, a lot of these natural. They're the ones who did it. Can you dig it? They were in hundreds of locations. They're the ones who did this stuff. All right? And they call it welfare, but it's not welfare because it's hard work. So you had to pay these men and you had to feed them good, right? And because there was no need for the money, you sent the money home to your poor family. Oh, however, we're going to keep it pushing. Civilian Conservation Corps enrollees are selected on a state quota basis by the Labor Department from unemployed and needy young men. Veterans are selected by the Veterans Bureau and make up 10% of the total enrollment. So understand that if vets make up 10% of the total enrollment, a number of the 250,000 black people who served, right on, listen, out of 250,000 black men who served in World War I, 50,000 of them, a whopping 50,000 of them were veterans who enrolled under the status of veteran. So that's not to say that they weren't a needy young man or unemployed. They may not have even enrolled as a veteran. They may have their cap for the number of veterans may have been exceeded. So there's no telling how many actual veterans, how many black veterans are actually there. That's crazy, y'all. Let's go ahead and keep it pushing. From the beginning of the Civilian Conservation Corps, colored youths have shared in the program. At the peak of the strength, the CCC reached in August 1935 were 506,000 young men and war veterans enrolled. Of this number, 50,000 were colored. Can you dig it? This is why they were mad about it. Because that 10% that you just read, right? Listen, that 10% is that same number right there. I hope y'all don't think that there was only 50,000 enrolled black people and it just told you that there was way more than that enrolled just earlier. Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it? All right? Look, let's just go up real quick. 1 second. There's 250,000 who served since the whole time. 30,000 young colored men and war veterans, right on. 1/10 of the total CCC enrollment are actively participating in that's bull. I need y'all to really understand the numbers don't make sense. How long do you think these guys were in these programs? What, 2 months? Please. There's the same people in them for years. Okay? Building their work ethic, learning how to do stuff. Don't listen. Don't look. The numbers, they're trying to lie with the numbers right now, but I'm telling you, that's bullshit. All right? Okay? Because it only lasted a few years until they cut the shit off because they were like, it's unconstitutional. Come on now. Come on now. Because they tried to say that a lot of the stuff that Roosevelt was doing was unconstitutional. Because you want to give white people money, but you don't want to give niggas nothing. You feel me? He got to work for it. Mindful of the health of these young men, medical officers of the U.S. Army Reserve Corps had been assigned to look, I don't know why I spelled wrong, but had been assigned to look at their physical well-being. 14 colored medical officers are now on active duty at the CCC camps throughout the country. Each company is provided with first aid building, company, hospital, dispensary with the medical officer in charge. Orderlies are appointed from among the enrollees. The Office of Education has acted in the advisory of the capacity of the War Department and working out an educational and recreation program. Listen, they were training dudes for war. Okay, this was like a reserve camp, pretty much. Each company has an educational advisor who develops a program suited to the individual needs of each camp. College graduates are appointed to fill these positions. 11,000 colored enrollees who were illiterate have been taught to read and write in classes offered by the CCC camps. How many of these people do you think went and fought in World War II? Today, there are 147 colored men serving in the CCC camps as education advisors. Most of the educational work is carried out on camp. Arrangements are often made, however, for enrollees to take additional work, to take additional schoolwork in public school, evening classes, and nearby sites. There we go. They make arrangement for these guys to go to school at night. The camp educational programs offer instructions in carpentry, shorthand, tying, forestry, auto mechanics, landscaping, and numerous other vocational subjects, which you would call a trade now. While attendance at classes is voluntary, approximately 90% of the colored enrollees attend. Classes in first aid, safety, morale, guidance, leadership, and hygiene have been well attended. While at work, CCC enrollees are given practical instruction on the job by the project superintendent and the technical staff. Baseball and softball diamonds, tennis courts, and basketball courts have been laid out to provide recreational facilities at the camps. Some of the camps have produced championship teams in baseball and other sports. Current movies, health educational films, lectures on geography, conservation, history, and other topics, and plays are included in the camp educational and entertainment program. Trips to nearby museums and other points of interest are frequently scheduled. 6 colored chaplains of the U.S. Army Reserve of the U.S. Army Reserve Corps direct the religious services or activities in a number of the colored camps. They are aided by ministers from nearby communities. Through experience and training received in the CCC, boys learn how to live together and work together amicably. Experience and training afforded by the CCC has helped many boys to secure employment. The specialized knowledge by filling such positions as mass sergeants, company clerks, assistants, education advisors, leaders, project assistants, store clerk manager, foreman, and first aid men have proved valuable to these enrollees in the Civilian Conservation Corps. Approximately 5,000 different courses, and 116 different subjects are being given in Forest Service Oak each month. In all camps, the National Park Service, probably 11,500 courses and 150 different subjects are being taught. That was obviously said in 1941. Can you dig it? Now I'm going to end that. Woo! Long-winded. However, now let's talk about this great white hoe and what they done. Give me 1 second. It done got all dark in here. Okay. It's going down, y'all. I hope everybody really sees what's going on in this stuff. What they did was this. In that program right there, right? They were able to pull enough black people, black men in particular, out of the home, right? In the poor South, poor rural South. How many of those young black men do you think had sisters, mothers that were left vulnerable, that people like the Klan went and victimized, raped, lynched, murdered, beat, all that stuff, right? See, the whole Great Depression is bullshit because black people were already in a depression, you see? In this next part that I'm going to do, it's going to I'm going to jump off into their ass, because I'm going to jump off into their ass now because I've been reading a bunch of information. And now I just want to get to the funky business, which is understanding how Jim Crow really pushed black people out of the South up north. Understanding how Jim Crow, right, forced the same black people who were for the same peanuts. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about real quick. I'm going to have it ready for you guys, right? But we got to understand that they were only giving people $40 a month, right? Now, that doesn't seem like, like a whole bunch of money, but that's how much they were paying those dudes back then. Like it was like $32.50 or something like that, right? But $40 a month ain't nothing. Not when you had to feed your family back then, a livable wage. A livable wage? If you were making like $12 a day, you were making a livable wage. That was like a really good livable wage, For a poor person, if you could make a quarter of that and make $3 or $4 a day, you were doing, you could survive, right? But $12 a day was probably like what you really needed to really make it, and to be doing okay. So when you have this dynamic where white people, who many of them had just ran with the bag, okay? They had just got done with the season of sharecropping. And when they got done with that season of sharecropping, what did they move? They moved to Oklahoma. Moved to Nebraska. Right? They moved west after a season of sharecropping. Didn't pay the black people nothing. You didn't have to. The Jim Crow laws, I didn't have to give you shit, nigga. Right. The New Deal was to give white people hope, because even after all the dirty fuckery they just did, somehow these black people were still surviving. Now I need y'all to really get something. The CCC, what it also actually did, right, was what's the name of the damn program that FDR opened up? I'll get to it in a second. But they canceled it out on this bitch ass because pretty much he started creating jobs out of nowhere, right? Like, like we're just gonna build a bridge. We're just gonna do it. You feel me? Because we can. And we're gonna put these guys to work. And it's gonna and then so like these judges were like, that's unconstitutional, dog. Like they're paying these dudes, good money, but none of these guys were being taught safety, none of that. They're falling off the bridges, dying. I mean, like, man, when they built the freaking Golden Gate Bridge, look how many people died building that motherfucker, y'all. You feel me? It's crazy. So when I'm talking about the Great White Hope, the New Deal was the Great White Hope, okay? And it was socialism, all right? In disguise in the form of wannabe capitalism, because you were working somehow. But really, what they did was they used black people to do the shit that they were supposed to had already been done, which was went and prune places, the same national parks that people go to and enjoy now. Who do you think built them up and made them like that? Right. Them blacks from the CCC. Who do you think were the ones doing all that undesirable work? Right. You think it was easy work that those black men were doing? All those black men weren't able to go and become employed. I'm sure a lot of those same black men ended up becoming veterans in World War II, and some of them probably even lost their lives. What's even crazier about that is that at this time, they still had this racist set of fucking laws in place that allowed for white people to treat black people however. And it didn't matter if you weren't in the South, because as I read to you, you could be in the North and still get your ass embarrassed. So once again, the Great White Hope, There was always hope for the white man. Always. There was always been in white heaven, there has never been a day where the white man has ever been like, woe is me, really. They're just complaining because they don't want to do what it takes. They're not industrious. They're not creative. If they were creative, they would have never been standing in soup lines. Them dudes would have been taking what little resources they had, putting them together and trying to make something happen. Now, I'm going to put them on blast here in a minute, right? With this lady, Miss Bailey. Now, Miss Bailey is a make-believe character, a proxy character. And more so than that, they'll try to give you the false perception. If I hadn't read to you what I just read to you about what black men were out there doing, they'll try to give you the false perception as if they were just giving aid to black families. But y'all know that these were black dudes who were out here working. The only black families who were getting aid were those who had people that were declared incompetent and ineligible to work in society, and the elderly and disabled. But this wasn't until like the middle of the 30s. You understand what I'm talking about? You know, these young black dudes that I was just reading about, they were doing that before. They had been working, been doing all that. So a person can't say, oh, well, Demetrius, you know, they only did that in spite of. No, they did that because their families were poor and starving. And they said, well, okay. And this is another reason why people had large families. Let me go ahead and point that out. You had to have a large family because maybe I send one or two of my kids, you know, maybe one of them will make it doing something like this. The rest of them will stay home. You couldn't, there's no way you had a small family in the rural South back in the day. You couldn't. You just couldn't. It was unsafe. You know, it wasn't just because I have to share crop and I have to pick cotton for a living, so I need a large family. It's like, no, you were praying to God that you had, you know, some sons. You didn't want, you know, 10 daughters. And it happened to some guys, of course, you know, but those are the type of men who I'm sure those dudes sweat beads every day. You know, like, I got to get out of here. I got to get somewhere. You have to. What? Because what's going to happen? You're in an environment where in which these people can do anything to you. They can do anything. I want y'all to really understand. They can do it. They could have done anything that they wanted. Now I'm gonna pull up this other little page, right? I'm gonna hit a couple things because there's probably about 50 or 60 little articles. We're obviously not gonna read them all. You know, like I said, I've read a good deal of them. Here we go. Damn. New Deal in the Negro. We're gonna pop this off. 1 second. This here. Yeah. All righty. Get this out the way. Now look. I need y'all to get something. Take with a grain of salt all these different characters, right? So when you see a name like Robert C. Weaver, you know, and I don't always do this whenever I'm doing stuff, but I'll make sure that it doesn't act up. Pull up images. He already looks like he's not really black, right? But they're calling him African American. Can you dig it? Look at this motherfucker. Can you dig it? That's not him. And that's that dirty bastard. That's him right next to the president. He looks like another white guy standing next to another white guy. African American, y'all. And it's not like he's got woolly crop on the side that makes it convincing. It's like, no, he's got that stuff that can be brushed down that just lays down for him. Anyway. An economist. Do you guys see what I'm saying, though? Like, you got to take the shit with a grain of salt, man, but you have to read it and you have to stomach it. And I know most people don't Most people don't have the initiative to stomach that kind of bullshit. I don't, but I do what I can for you guys because I love y'all. Oh, got a picture of this sorry bastard right here. Anyway. Economist Robert C. Weaver was the first African American to hold a cabinet level position as the first United States Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, from January 18, 1966 to December 18, 1968. As a young man, Weaver had been one of 45 prominent African Americans appointed by FDR to his black cabinet, where he acted as an informal advisor as well as directing federal programs during the New Deal. Look, man, I need y'all to understand. White fucking heaven and the great white hope, okay? They put even a white looking motherfucker in charge of the black people. And you best believe this dude probably got a white daddy. All right? Word is bond. Word is motherfucking bond. It is impossible to discuss intelligently the New Deal and the Negro without considering the status of the Negro prior to the advent of the recovery program. The present economic position of colored citizens was not created by local legislation alone, by recent legislation alone. Rather, it was an impact of a new program upon an economic and social situation. Right. Blacks weren't allowed to work and they were being treated like any old thing. Look, y'all, the same people who passed the Jim Crow laws are the same people who believed that blacks were only 3/5 of a human and 40% beast. Okay? There's no way you can convince me that anything else otherwise. I'm not going to be convinced. Much has been said recently about the occupational distribution of Negroes. Over half of the gainfully employed colored Americans are concentrated in domestic service and farming. These workers in these two pursuits are the most casual and unstable in the modern economic world. This following from the fact that neither of them requires any great capital outlay to buy necessary equipment. Thus, when there is a decline in trade, the employment of workers in those fields does not necessitate idle plants, large depreciation costs, or mounting overhead charges. In such a situation, the employer has every incentive to dismiss his workers. Thus, these two classes are fired early in a depression. Stop right there. What they're trying to say is that they don't have jobs with job security, okay? They don't have a job where you need this person to do the job. Anybody can do the job. And because you are supplying the tools to the person more than likely doing the job, right? You don't need them because you have the tools and you can get rid of their ass. First, last to get hired, first to get fired. Anyway, the domestic worker has loomed large among the unemployed since the beginning of the current trade decline. This situation has persisted throughout the Depression and is reflected in the relief figures from urban communities where 20% of the employees on relief were formerly attached to personal and domestic service. Among Negroes, the relative number of domestic and service on relief is even greater. Chart not available. In these cities, 43.4% of the Negroes on relief May 1st, 1934, were usually employed as domestics. The demand for servants is a derived one. It is dependent upon the income and employment of other persons in the community. Thus, domestics are among the largest rehired in a period of recovery. Stop right there. It's talking about people who live close. Now, I want y'all to understand something. When they talk about unemployed, you need to understand the word unemployed and then suffering are totally different. Now, they're talking about these people who are getting relief. How many of these Negroes, there's 2.5 million in the North, or, yeah, is that right? 2.5 million in the North. Let's just go right back up real quick. And 9.5 million in the South, I want to say. it might not be on this part of it. That might just be part of the overall overlay. 1 second. So we'll get to the numbers in a minute, right? But 2.5 million, I want to say in the north, 9.5 in the south, right? These are black people who were being forced out of work. Now, you guys really need to get black people were slaves. Holy fuck. So where else would they have been other than the fucking South right after the war anyway? Right after they were, where are you gonna go, dog? How you can't just start a business. You can't just start one. That's not how it works. Okay. This guy who was in charge of the finances, you can see he's some type of quadroon or something like that. You know, he not even half black. So the whole problem is like when you have dudes like him being put in charge of something, it's like, dog, this can't be real right now. Even if this dude can say, my father or my grandfather was a black man, it's like, well, dude, look how white you are now. And they only trust you because you look like one of them and you think and act like one of them, you know? However, of the some 30,000, right? Y'all got to realize a substantial number of the 2.5 million people would have been women and children, over half of them, right? So many of the men would have been elderly men, unable to work. So a large number of the young men that were able to go and work in these programs, the ones who didn't were sharecroppers, probably because their parents wouldn't let them go. Y'all really understand it. This shit is so deep, man. You know, it's a play on words because they understood that sharecropping was going to take place. They couldn't do every black person wrong. You can't do all the niggas wrong because fuck, somebody's got to pick the cotton because these white boys ain't going to do it. And sure, don't let me, tell no lie and say that ain't no white person ever picked no cotton because they have, but that's not what they did, okay? White people, even back during the sharecropping days, they used to watch and make sure that niggas wasn't stealing shit, okay? So, man, anyway, man, let me just go ahead and get back to it. Because the black despair that they're talking about was an onset of these laws that they failed to talk about during this. Now, do you see how this is a so-called educational website, right? Talking about the New Deal and the Negro, talking about the Great Depression, and hasn't even brought up the Jim Crow. The other thing didn't even talk about the Jim Crow stuff. It's totally acting as if racism didn't exist for these black people. So this is a part of black despair, is that everybody looks at your situation as if it's your fault. They're talking about these people being unemployed or not having work as if it's their fault, as if it's their fault that white people decided to firebomb Oklahoma. Right on. It's their fault that the same white people who ran off just a year before this shit got really bad, right? Because the Dust Bowl is so huge. When I show y'all the years, y'all are gonna be like, damn, this nigga ain't lying. The Dust Bowl, y'all, and the time when these dudes did the little move, these black people, a lot of these black people only needed money because a lot of them had just got ripped off by these same white people who became victims in the Dust Bowl. I'm not bullshitting. It's fucking crazy. I'm gonna keep reading. Although it is regrettable that the economic depression has led to the unemployment of so many Negroes and has threatened the creation of a large segment of the Negro population as a chronic relief load, one is forced to admit that federal relief has been a godsend to the unemployed. The number of unemployed in this country was growing in 1933. According to the statistics of American Federation of Labor, the number of unemployed increased from 3.2 million in January 1930 to 13.689 million in March 1933. Now understand this right here. These are people, I know that's not talking about all black people right there. That's talking about the number of people. period, who were unemployed. Okay, so when they throw around these types of numbers, do you see how they're trying to make black people look hella bad? They're like, oh, black people were a constant need of relief. And look, dog, if there was 12 million black people in the country at the time, 9.5 million of them lived in the South. Listen to what I'm trying to say to you. Hundreds of thousands of those people, you could argue millions of them, were affected by that faulty ass move just a year before with the fucking shit I'm talking about with the sharecropping. Okay, you can't just come back from that right away. So those white people did that right after the fall of the stock market. All this shit falls in line. And if you guys really look at it, they thought they were playing a smart move by going out west and taking the money and leaving the black people with the bag. Okay? They thought they had really pulled the okie doke and they got fucked. But we're going to talk about that later. In November 1934, the number was about 10.5 million. And although there was no comparable data available, estimates indicate that the current unemployment is less than half of last November. Local relief monies were shrinking, and need and starvation were facing those unable to find an opportunity to work. A federal relief program was the only possible aid in this situation. Insofar, the Negro was greatly victimized by the economic developments. He was in a position to benefit from a program which provided adequate funds for relief. Don't talk about Jim Crow. It is admitted that there were many abuses under the relief setup. Such situations should be brought to light and fought. In the cases of the Negroes, these abuses undoubtedly exist and do exist. We should extend every effort to uncover and correct them. We can admit that we have gained from the relief program and still fight to receive greater and more equitable benefits from it. Listen, they just told you that they gained from the relief program. What? They use black people, dog, man. I fucking can't break it down enough. White heaven and black despair. Fucking A, the great white hope, y'all. The recent depression has been extremely severe in its effect upon the South. The rural Negro poor before the period of trade decline was rendered even more needed after. Many tenants found it impossible to obtain a contract for a crop, and scores of Negro farm owners lost their properties. Wow. The displacement of Negro tenants was yet the case for whites, began before and grew throughout the Depression. No, what they did was they fucking took their land from. This was during the Jim Crow shit where they were just taking niggas shit, y'all. They was just taking it. Give me that. Taking farms dudes were sharecropping on their own land. You had cats who went and worked and tried to farm on their own land, and the dudes wouldn't even let them work on dudes had humbled themselves where, okay, you won't let me somehow keep my land to the bank, but let me see if I can't go work for the man that's going to buy it. And the man that's going to buy it won't even let you work on your own land that you tendered. And then years later, it's rendered useless. Right on, pesticides need to be fucking used because they don't know nothing. And then black farmers who live within the proximity of these people end up needing the same pesticides because they get the same pest because these dudes use the same nasty cow biological warfare, pig biological warfare manure, right on. It's not from a healthy animal. They're using cows that aren't healthy, as opposed to a cow that free grazes. This is a cow that didn't free graze naturally. A cow that they, you know what I'm saying, that they may have a lack to give good nutrition. Man, these people they're disgusting. Anyway, all their ways are so freaking, you should excoriate them every time you get the chance, because they try to make it seem as if black people needed the help for something that they had done wrong, but it was not on their own doing, okay? They're not talking have you seen the word Jim Crow yet? No. This is what I'm talking about. The great white hope. They just make it seem as if motherfuckers, just black people, just Bambamanoosh needed some help. Like they didn't work. But if you guys understood what I just read to you earlier, These same politicians were using blacks as the reason for whites to be racist against them. Come on, man, this shit is crazy. During the same era, during the same times, you can't separate the two, y'all. If you try to separate them, right, what you do is you create confusion in the mind. All right, Jim Crow, right on, and the Great Depression, especially what it created and caused for black people in the South, forcing them out. I'm trying to show y'all why the mass exodus happened. Okay, this is what happened. This is what was going on. All right, people were starving, being raped, beat to death, houses being set on fire. Man, people just living in fear, dog. And you couldn't do nothing. The displacement of Negro tenants, as was the case for whites, cough, cough, began before and grew throughout the Depression. Thus, at the time of the announcement of the New Deal, there were many out arrangements for a crop, a number without shelter. The problems facing the Negro farmer of the South are not new. They have been accentuated by the crop reduction program. They are, for the most part, problems of a system, and resistance to reform is as old as the system. Talking about racism. This was illustrated by the abuses in the administration of the federal feed, seed, and fertilizer laws in 1928 and 29. These abuses were the same nature of those which confront the AAA and the dealings with the Negro tenants. What this did was it gave people feed and seed and fertilizers to fix the land with, but it wouldn't give you fucking food to feed yourself, dog. This was under Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover tried to say that he cared, but nah, he didn't give a fuck. That's why he let that flood happen. Man, anyway, man, that's why Republicans lost the black vote, because they were like, we can treat these niggas any way we want and they're going to come back. And they found out that's not how it was. The Southern farm tenant is in such a position that he cannot receive any appreciable gains from a program until steps are taken to choose his position from absolute economic dependence upon the landlord. Until some effective measures from rehabilitating him is discovered, there is no hope. The new program for land utilization, rural rehabilitation, and spreading land ownership may be able to affect such a change. Spreading land ownership. They were just taking your land from you. Wow. And so as far as it takes a step that in that direction, it will be advantageous to the Negro farmer. To the degree which it aids him, to the degree which it aids him will depend upon the temper of its administration and the extent to which it is able to break away from the status quo. Now, understand right here, y'all, if we go back to what it's talking about, people starving, right? Why do you think people were gaining 7 to 15 pounds on average, dog? Right? Because motherfuckers weren't eating, right? And you had to go out there and work, man. This shit is crazy. And under Jim Crow, man, white fucking heaven couldn't have got no colder. It couldn't have got any colder, y'all. I'm trying to tell you, this shit is so vicious. Let's keep reading. Enlisting some of the gains which have been accrued by the Negro, right? Accrued to the Negroes under the New Deal, there will be a discussion of 3 lines of activity: housing, employment, and emergency education. These are chosen for discussion because each is significant in itself. All represent a definite break from the status quo in governmental activity, method, and policy. They do not give a complete picture, but rather supply interesting examples of what is and can be done for Negroes. Now, stop right there. The reason why they're talking about all this, right, is because a lot of the poor rural black people were, listen, so you're separate but equal, but a lot of the conditions weren't equal, so you didn't get an adequate education. The learning you did get, at best, right, maybe somebody in your family went and learned to read and taught you to read, and this is what gave you the edge, right on. But you weren't a Negro who was trying to work in a field for your whole life. If you could read, shit, you was trying to go get a real job. So This is why the power of so-called education, literacy should be the word. All right. Literacy is so important. Being able to read and spell, right, and use proper grammar were what was needed. But it wasn't needed just for black people. This is why they did this to black people. This is why they went so hard on black people to create the economic situation of just trying to survive in the South, so that way these blacks would seem uneducated and stupid and dumb. But how stupid and dumb were these guys when some of these people were inventors, right? Some of the best and brightest minds. Come on now, y'all. This is the whole thing about it. And they tried to make this. I'm gonna go into it in another section, right on. This is why white heaven, the great white hope, and black despair needs more than one part, because it's that deep, and each part has to get talked about. And like I said, it's a fist. Each part. This is a fist right here. They're trying to serve it up on us. They're just trying to tell us you blacks needed all kinds of help. But they won't even tell you what the actual things that were plaguing you. And if I hadn't read this shit about the Jim Crow earlier, hadn't even pointed it out, it wouldn't even be factual. Or it would be factual, but it wouldn't be as pertinent. Understanding that out of 12 million people, almost 10 million of them, almost 5/6 of the population, right on, live in one area of the country, and they're subject to a law and the rule where in which it is so demonizing to your character as a man, a woman, and a child, that trying to learn to read a book is the last thing you're trying to do when you barely have enough beans on your little plate to fill your stomach up. And you're expected to get up there to go out there the next day and to continue working. However, let's just keep reading. PWA Housing Division. The Housing Division of the Federal Emergency Administration of Public Works has planned 60 federal housing projects to be under construction by December 31st, 1935. Of these, 28 are to be developed in Negro slum areas and will be tenanted predominantly and wholly by Negroes. 8 additional projects will provide for an appreciable degree of Negro occupancy. These 36 projects will afford approximately 74,664 rooms and should offer accommodation for about 23,000 low-income colored families. Listen, y'all, I need y'all to understand this shit. We're about to read it. I'm about to break it down. Who do y'all really funded it? Rockefeller? Come on, let's keep it pushing. The estimated total cost of this housing development will be $64,428,000. And they represent about 29% of the funds devoted to federal slum clearance developments under the present allotments. Project in Negro areas have been announced in 7 cities. Understand these same places and the problems that they have now. Atlanta, Cleveland, Detroit, Indianapolis, Montgomery, Chicago, and Nashville. These will cost about $33,232,000 and will contain about 20,000 rooms. 2 of these projects in the University development of Atlanta and the Thurman Street development in Montgomery are under construction. These are among the earliest federal housing projects to be initiated by the PWA. Stop. This is so that way they could sequester black people, put all their asses in one area. Can you dig it? Boom. Now we don't even have to look for them. We're gonna know where these niggas is at. Bam. Put them somewhere. They're gonna thank us and love us, right? Until they realize what we've done. Can you dig it? Man, it's so filthy. And you got to think about how many black people were really living in some of these, 2-bedroom housing projects. But these are some of the same housing projects that they would force men out of just 30 years later, saying to the woman, if you get rid of the man, we'll give you a check and money. Man, this shit is fucking crazy, dude. Fuck. Let me just keep reading. After a series of conferences and a period of experience under the PWA, it was decided to include a clause of PWA housing contracts requiring the payment to Negro mechanics of giving percentages of payroll going to skilled workers. Wow, you had niggas fixing shit all over the place in this bitch, and they wouldn't even pay them, dog. Man, get the fuck out of here. The first project to be affected by such a contractual clause was the Techwood development in Atlanta, Georgia. On this project, most of the labor employed on demolition was composed of unskilled Negro workers. How can you be unskilled and do the jobs, y'all? Do you see the play? Man, the fucking bullshit. About 60% of the unskilled workers employed laying from the foundation of the Techwood project were Negroes. Stop right here. These are the same people that I'm trying to tell y'all who had grandfathers or fathers who had these skills, right? Who just got freed from slaves. You guys need, you need to understand what the years are. These are the 20s and the 30s, y'all. Word is bond. All right. So if we're in the 1930s, this is, you could argue 70 years after slavery, right? So you could say 3 generations. Some people would say 4. Nah, we're going to say dude got out of slavery. He had kids in 1870, 1880. Them people is grown in the 1920s and 1930s, 40s and 50s. So they had young kids. They were taught the skills by their fathers. These people taught the skills to their children. They were forced to be sharecroppers, forced to do that because they couldn't, nobody was going to give you a loan to do anything. Right on? So you can't say that Negro mechanics of a given percentage of the payroll going to skilled workers. You can't say they're skilled and then call them unskilled, dog. Get the fuck out of here. But anyway, they say 60% of the unskilled workers laying the foundation for the Techwood project were Negroes. For the first 2-month construction period, February and March, 12.7% of the wages paid skilled workers. 12.7% of wages paid skilled workers was earned by Negro artisans. Listen, when they try to say skilled workers, okay, they're literally trying to say that somebody who can do something with their hands, but they're trying to say that a dude who, you had to have skills, you have to have skills to do all these fucking jobs, man. Don't let them confuse you, okay? Don't let them confuse you, all right? Don't let them talk to you like your people don't know how to do nothing. I'm not going to let them talk to you like that, all right? Don't believe the hype. Federal Emergency Relief Administration Educational Program. Under the educational program of FERA, out of a total of 17,879 teachers employed in 13 southern states, 5,476, or about 30.6%, were Negro. Out of the total 570,794 enrolled in emergency classes, 217,000, or 38%, were Negro. Out of the total 886,300 expended in a month, either February or March 1935 for the program, Negroes received 231,000, or 26.1%. These southern states, in which 26.1% of all emergency salaries were paid to Negro teachers, ordinarily allot only 11.7% of all public school salaries to Negro teachers. Now, I won't go into this about how many of them were women, and then of the men teachers, how many of them were actually, biracial or just not even black at all. This shit is it's so sickening. The situation may be summarized as follows. 6 of the 13 states are spending for Negro salaries a proportion of their emergency education funds larger than the percentage of Negroes in those states. The area as a whole is spending for Negro salaries as a portion of its funds slightly in excess of the percentage of Negroes in the population. This development is an example of government activity breaking away from the status quo in race relations. No, it's because they were underdeveloped, so you had to spend more money. Don't let them try to, once again, the fuckery of the words, man. There was one government expenditure and education reference to which has been general agreement that equity has been established. That is the FERA College Scholarship Program. Each college or university not operated for profit received $20 per month as aid for 12% of its college enrollment. Negro and white institutions have benefited alike under this program. In the execution of some phases of the recovery program, there have been difficulties, and the maximum results have not been received by the Negroes. Right, because they're spending all the money on the poor whites as opposed to the poor blacks, because they're like, these poor whites are way stupider than these, way dumber, way stupider. The poor blacks just can't read, but these motherfuckers ain't stupid. The white dudes are eating dirt pies, because please. Anyway, let me keep it pushing. In the execution of some phases of the recovery program, there have been difficulties, and maximum results have not been received by the Negroes. But given the economic situation of the 1932 New Deal, has been more helpful than harmful to Negroes. How, no shit. Anything you can't do worse than Jim Crow, cuz man, you can't do worse than Jim Crow. So anything is better than Jim Crow, is what they were saying. We had an unemployment. We had an unemployment in 1932. Jobs were being lost by Negroes, and they were in need. Many would have starved, but had there been no federal relief program. Now stop right there. What they're trying to say is this. In 1932, you had some dirty, skullduggerous motherfuckers in 1931 who ran out with the money, right? Because in 1930 they fucked them when they did the crop pulling, and in 1931 they didn't pay nobody, right? And then so these same Negroes came back picking cotton, but if you ain't got nobody who gonna buy it from you, or you're selling it for, you're getting way less than it. Pretty much you're getting punked for it. You're picking it, and then now you're getting almost nothing for it, or there is no tools to do anything with. It's all dirty, y'all. You feel me? You see what I'm saying? So for the few people who didn't starve, it's because there was a little bit of work for them to do. But anyway, the people who did starve is because the people took the money and ran. They took the tools. They had no ability. There was no way to do anything. You know, they had no way of accomplishing these things, and this had to be totally known by the white people who ran off. And this is why, you know, when we talk about the Dust Bowl in our next segment, you know, and some other things, it's going to really fall into place when I talk about this Jim Crow shit again. Jim Crow will be a part of it, all of it. You know, I'm not going to really harp too hard on the Rockefellers right now because we've gotten to read about the Negro projects. I'm going to finish this off, and then, you know, we're just going to talk for a little bit, you know. But I really need y'all to get, you know, we've been in white heaven for a minute, y'all. You feel me? It's been white heaven for a second. Now, I'm going to break something down to you. The reason why they use such incendiary language and such manipulation when talking about black people is because if you look at the inventors of the times and the things that were invented just 10, 15 years before, black people were the inventors of all these things. So you have to realize is, who are you calling uneducated or unskilled or unwhatever? No, you've given us no opportunities. And then a beacon of hope, which was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, you allowed for white people to tear it down. Then you allowed for these same dirty devils to go back to Oklahoma and act like they were going to just fucking homestead all over the bitch. What? Fuck no. Anyway, let me read this. We had unemployment in 1932. Jobs were being lost by Negroes, and they were in need. Many would have starved had there been no federal relief program. As undesirable as is the large relief load among Negroes, the Führer has meant much to them. And most of the New Deal setups, there has been some Negro representation by competent Negroes. The Department of the Interior and PWA has appointed some 15 Negroes to a job of responsibility which pay good salaries. These are all mulattoes for the most part, y'all. These persons have secretarial and clerical staffs attached to their offices. In addition to these new jobs, there are colored messengers who number about 100, and the elevator operators for the government buildings, of whom there are several hundred. Right, those are the niggas. This is not, of course, adequate representation, but it represents a step in the desired direction and is greater recognition than has been given Negroes in the federal government during the last 20 years. Now, stop right there. I want y'all to understand something. They're saying this was in 1930 something, y'all. Okay, when they said that. Okay? They're saying that from 1912 until 1930 something, they could tell you that for sure, that 20-year period, that the Jim Crow was so racist and so crucial and so vicious, there was no way a nigga was going to have a job like that. Okay? It wasn't until a lot of these white dudes, right, were dying off, the most vicious racist of them, and their children just had an affinity for black flesh, be it their sons or their daughters, and so much so that they were like, just can't ride with that all the way. And I'm going to talk about that in the next segment. Don't worry, I'm gonna get everything will be talked about. There will be no stone unturned in white heaven as it appertains to black people. This, of course, is not adequate representation, but it represents a step in the desired direction and is greater recognition that has been given Negroes in the federal government during the last 20 years. Or again, in the Nashville Housing Project, a Negro architectural firm is a consultant. For the Southwest Side Housing Projects in Chicago, a Negro is an associate architect. One of the proposed projects will have 2 Negro principal architects, a Negro consultant architect, and a technical staff of about 6 Negro technicians. In other cities, competent colored architects will be used to design housing projects. This analysis is intended to indicate some advantages accruing to the Negro under their recovery program, and to point out that the New Deal, in so as far as it represents an extension of governmental activity into the economic sphere, is a departure which can do much to reach Negro citizens. Stop right there. I'm going to finish this off, but I'm about to get their ass. In many instances, it has availed itself of these opportunities. An intelligent appraisal of its operation is necessary to ensure greater benefits to colored citizens. Fucking bullshit. Check this out. What they meant to say was, these niggas have helped save America once again. If they didn't get niggas in there when they got them in there, it was over. Believe that. Oh, I love it. These guys there's no truth in them. But the little truth they do tell, they're going to say something, and they just told on themselves. Trust me, they told on themselves when they said that little bit. That told me everything. You know, I don't believe there's a better way to be about it. 1 second, y'all. Let me go ahead and catch myself up, because I'm doing a lot of reading. Can y'all dig it? Do y'all really dig it though? Huh? The Great White Hope. They tried to put black people down just then. Look, if I was a black person reading that now and I had no understanding of the history of slavery, that would bring my soul down. That would just make me feel so little. But knowing what black people went through, right? The fact that they weren't eating dirt pies when white people found them doing whatever they were doing is a testimony. And nobody wants to talk about this, that the Great White Hope was contingent on skilled black labor that built the projects. They build those housing projects. They build a lot of those skyscrapers, those skyscrapers as well. What they fail to tell you, what they don't want to say, is that they use those black people and they use the mulatto as a buffer class, right? They picked mulattoes who had no physical labor skills, a mouthpiece, and had the ability to read, and they picked the mulattoes as the front men, as the face for the blacks, right? And then they put the hardworking blacks, the ones who actually had the physical abilities, on the front lines. The same shit they do today. But it's not a secret. It's not a secret. What it is we're pointing out the Great White Hope, because the Great White Hope lied in the New Deal. The New Deal was socialism, once again, disguised as capitalism. If you overlook how they tried to do what they've done to black people, if you try to overlook what they've said to black people, as I just read to you, you know, it's really a travesty. You know, it's a travesty, because they would make it or have you to believe that we couldn't work or we weren't able to work. No, there was only certain work available in the South. The South didn't have industry. It had slavery, right? So what industries did the South create in the 70 years that the blacks got free? Nothing. They created fucking Jim Crow, dog, to keep black people suppressed, so that way black people couldn't create industries that would have created jobs for everybody. But they were afraid of being outperformed. So what they did was they created these racist ass rules that kept black people so far under that all you could do was pick cotton, even if you knew how to fix cars, even if you knew how to make clothes, even if you knew how to fix shoes. Can you dig it? Even if you were like a biologist, all right? So what they did was they used Jim Crow to suppress black people for so long. The blacks that had already made it to the North, right? They had low-level jobs where I've already pointed out to you, they too could be oppressed. But their oppression was different because they were so-called in the free North, right? Or the freer North. But now we can be racist towards you on any level. And we can say it's not because you're black. It's because your clothes aren't as nice as ours. But the black man knows I only don't have good clothes like you because I'm black and I just moved from the South. So is it because I have dirty clothes? It's because I'm black, dog. And once again, to keep black people suppressed from 1877 to 1932, dog, that's almost 60 years. Are you fucking hearing me? All right. So you're talking about like somebody's whole lifetime. Because you know people weren't living that long back then. So if a dude lived 53 years, to a lot of people that was a healthy stretch, because you might only live 30. How hard they were working people. People got worked to death. All right. It was black fucking despair. I'm not even going to talk about Louisiana, because Louisiana makes light of slavery because they make light of the Willie. We'll talk about that in the next segment when we talk about, you know, the interracial thing. You know, I'm going to go in on the Franks again, but I'm not going to go too hard, but I do have to talk about that. But when we talk about how they kept black people, I mean, under the thumb, where you couldn't do shit. You couldn't do shit. You could look, man. You walked on the other side of the street of white people. You didn't make no eye contact. You looked down when you was talking to them. Right on. Yes, sir. No, sir. No, I don't want no problems. How you doing? You know what I'm saying? Right. You talk about people who were well-mannered. Oh, some extremely well-mannered black people. Because they were terrified. Because they had been disarmed. Right? Are y'all hearing me? This is why this shit is so deep. Then they built the projects. Listen to when they built the projects. They built it they didn't build them right after slavery to house a nigga. No, they let you build your own stuff. Then they tore it down so many times to where you were the whole country was in a slump. And somehow black people were still finding ways to survive. And what they did was they said, you know what? We can get some cheap, good labor if we tell these niggas we'll feed them and pay them. So what they do, they fed them and they paid them. And they got some bomb-ass cheap labor, right? So-called taught them a skill. No, what it did was now you have credentials, which is something that I can take with me on paper, say that I've done. Because the credentials say that I was here. If the credentials have a government stamp on it, you can only question the government stamp so much. Now, as a black man, you would be weary and leery about giving your government stamp credentials to a white person in a racist ass place, because you know that they might not give your shit back out of spite. I've never seen a nigger with nothing like this. Give me that, nigger. And you're like, man, that took me 3 or 4 years to get. This is it's so crazy, y'all. So when they talk about how bad the situation was for black people, they didn't even address Jim Crow. They didn't even fucking talk about it. And the shit was policy. It was policy. It was legislated policy. And they didn't even say, yo, once like, well, Jim Crow kind of did hurt black people. And it hurt them in a way where nobody can really understand how it hurt them until you look at, well, when they did get a chance to move up north, right? And they moved to the projects that were in New York, because you guys got to understand, they didn't start building New York up to the 50s and 60s. I mean, not New York, but Miami, Florida, excuse me. But Florida in particular was swampish and rural for a lot of the part. It didn't get built up to like, you could argue certain parts of the 40s, but really the 50s, the 60s, they really put a lot of work into it. So a lot of blacks, coloreds, whatever they want to call us, we was like, we're out of this motherfucker, we're going out, we're moving up north. And they moved to places like New York, places like Connecticut. That's why they still go and visit places like Florida and Georgia so often. That's because that's their connection there. However, when you look at all those hubs that they built those ghettos in, right? Because they're all ghettos now. Then I talk about in the next segment, which will probably be, you know, I'm thinking it'll be this weekend. It'll probably be this weekend, more than likely. And I'm gonna do my weekly update tomorrow when I get done running my errands, just to let y'all know. Oh, that's coming. Can't wait to talk about the wall. We're building the wall. I'm telling you. But anyway, Black Despair, White Heaven, their hope. What has happened here is we've had people overlook the situation. So you have certain black people who will try to say, oh, they signed civil rights as a compromise to end Jim Crow. No, they didn't. No, the fuck they didn't. If black people wanted to end Jim Crow overnight, all they had to do was all of them move to just one state. We're out of here. We're moving to one spot. We're out of here. Everybody, let's go. Mass exit. I mean, a real mass exodus. Let's go. We out of here. With guns in tow. You touch our families, it's a war. The government would have had no choice but to respond to it much differently. But because you have, once again, these people with splintered bloodlines where, well, my granddaddy white, so I ain't going nowhere. See? You see that mentality? That's how they think. Right. They got white granddaddies. You know what I'm saying? God forbid, they're like me and they're trying to say my grandmama white. And they, wow, dog, you got a great grandmama who's a white chick and you're hinging, you think that makes you think that makes you a white person? Right on. Had that woman got with another white person, she wouldn't even be in your bloodline because you're from your father still. But that's how silly these dudes are. Right on. So when the person says my granddaddy white, I'm really hearing them like, oh shit, the white person in them really just came out like what's left just came to the surface, dog. Like, I don't give a fuck how dark their skin is. Okay, I know niggas who were black who have white ancestry, where you're like, there's no way there's white people in this dude's family. And it's like, yeah, so-and-so is a white person. But it's what it is. So we need to really address all the different things. The despair that black people faced for that 55, almost 60-year period under Jim Crow, until white people thought, well, you know what? I think these niggas have had enough. And I think we've had enough, because the Dust Bowl fucking kicked down. Right. Because that Dust Bowl got off on that ass. Man, I've already got the information, but I got a lot of stuff going on this week. I could possibly do part 2 Thursday, maybe? After court? Yeah, maybe even Thursday. That'd be filthy. I'm ready. I just don't feel like doing no 4-hour expose that I know, don't nobody want to be sitting here for no 4, 5, 6 hours, because I got a lot more reading to do for y'all. The only thing I need to read to you guys now are things that are, I've already read both of the articles. One of them is going to take like 20 minutes to read. So we're going to have to be ready for that. So get ready for that. And then the other one is just like this one that I just read to you guys. Like I'm gonna stop every couple moments to check this shit. I don't feel no type of way. Right on. White heaven and the great white hope is not for the faint at heart. It's not for the squeamish or the thin-skinned. If you can't take it, please, you know what I'm saying? Bid your adieu, because I totally understand the objectivity to what I am putting forth. It's not easy for people to really understand that, like, even if I talk about how the Rockefellers invested into things like eugenics and that false ass science, which I'm going to talk about, all these things will be spoke on, but they have to be presented in the right way. So when I talk about Jim Crow the next time, and then I talk about eugenics with it, then I talk about them putting their fucking foot on black people's necks and black people trying to escape the South. Black people didn't have the money to leave. Why do you think they built the projects for them in the first place? How do you think black people were able to upkeep those projects? Right. They didn't just become run down 5 years later. People need to understand the poor condition that blacks have been made to live in. Right, what I'm saying? The Negro or the Afro man has been made to live in. But black people really have had it rough, because as long as you have it bad, they have it good. That's true. Because the white man was like, at least I got it better than that nigger. And that's normally how they consider it in their minds. You know what I mean? We're going to do things with this that, I mean, I felt like today was really, I felt like this last couple hours was really, I felt good about it. I don't know how y'all felt, but I felt good about it. You know, I'm excited that I was able to do something on my birthday. You know, this is a nice little gift to myself. You know, getting it off my chest. I mean, reading all that information to you really just like gives the black despair an idea of what they're trying, because as bad as they try to make it seem, you need to get that there were social parameters or in play that literally kept black people from doing anything. And then, so what if you move to the north? So now you're taking the chance of going a place where nobody might not ever hear from you again, especially if you moved as a black man by yourself, or a black man with your pretty black wife. God forbid you move somewhere where these white men have the hankering for black women, God forbid, right on, and you're not an armed black man, God forbid. God only knows how many bad situations like that have taken place with black men. God only knows. God only knows how many, you know, uh, uh, children of adultery have taken place like that. I'm sure there's been a lot of black men to go places with his black wife and to sleep around town with some white women. Oh, I'm sure of it. I'm sure the skullduggerous nature doesn't escape him either. But the idea of a black man being a victim and then his wife being a victim soon thereafter him, and if she resists, they kill her too. It's nothing. They kill both of you. But as many people as there are who say something like, "Oh, my grandmother should have fought back," I doubt that. So it's just one of those things where they have to point out the rape. You know, I have to point out that that's what they hang their hats on. The reason why they hang their hat on raping black women, and I'm gonna end on this note of the great white hope and black despair. The despair for a lot of black slaves really began when white women showed their natural affinity for black men. You know what I'm saying? Uh, it over over it that hurt the entire foundation for what black men probably would have gone through as far as slaves. You know, uh, the first mulattoes, mixed breeds, whatever, were from a white woman and a black man. I I can't stress this enough. You know, and that jealousy, that burning hatred, you know, never leave them. And you're talking about all throughout slavery. Their little white daughters and their white wives, their white sisters, their white aunties, their white cousins are going out there and fucking these black boys and getting pregnant by them. Right. See what I'm saying? And they don't want to talk about it, y'all. Like when I talk about, like, that's the thing that nobody really wants to talk about. They hate talking about that. Because it's not about me talking about some kind of interracial nonsense. It's about, white women forcing themselves on black men just as much as white men force themselves on black women. And if people look at how the two have been sexual objects of the opposite race, opposite gender, right? For as long as we've been in this country, we've been an object of their sexual desire for forever. So until black people realize that they're obsessed with you, right on, unhealthily, you know what I mean? The reason why I can't stress this shit enough. It's why they get in your space. You can say it's repulsive to think about, but it takes place to this very day, and it's the nature of the beast that we live in, right on. They have forced themselves on us. That's what Jim Crow was. Jim Crow, and we're gonna end on this, and and I tip my hat on this, and we're gonna move into knowing that our next segment will be heavy on uh, eugenics, Dust Bowl, and some sharecropping, right on. And we're going to really break it down there. And there's going to be a lot more of this bullshit I'm talking about now, because that's where a lot of the skullduggerous activity took place. Is during the sharecropping days. It was when these white men, and when these white women were doing a lot of this crazy stuff, after, obviously, the Civil War, because people are like, well, where did all these mixed people come from who are here now? I'm like, well, they didn't just, once again, they didn't materialize out of thin air. All right. There obviously some procreating had to be going on. And the only way to discover this, the only way to acknowledge it is to say, okay, well, how could this have happened? Okay, well, the only way that this is a possibility is for this person to be an illegitimate child of these types of individuals who were in this sort of field of understanding. And Jim Crow put a serious wedge between, I'm not going to say it put a wedge between black men and black women right then and there, but the scar of Jim Crow, I think I think it was, I think it hurt more 100 years later in 2012 than it hurt, let's say, 70 years later, okay, in 1970 something. Can you dig it? I think people may have been more aware of Jim Crow at a time before this, but I think now, I think young black people who are really sensitive about their blackness, you know what I mean? I think, young black people who are really trying to learn how to love their people and learn how to love their self, when they read about these types of things, you know what I mean? Like, they're not given no hope, and that's why I do my best to give people hope at the end of the day, because and that's why I fight so hard to tell y'all that's bullshit when I see that it's bullshit, especially if I can't stop on every little thing, but the things that I know that should be, vehemently objected against with every bit and parcel of my being, I have to speak on it. Because if I don't, then I failed not just myself, but I failed another person who's thinking, well, what could I do that's better than what he's doing? If they don't have a way of telling people something that they think is better, maybe they have a stellar presentation, right on, that is just out of, just totally out of the atmosphere, right? And they steal people's minds like that. And that's how they're able to get their attention. Right, because I need to steal that little piece to give you this other stuff back. Because that part of your mind that's believing things that are not true, we got to get rid of the lies. We have to realize what happened to our people in this country after they were let go from bondage, from the hardest of the bondage. And then we have to realize the psychological bondage we've been under since then. See, people talk about Jim Crow, but in my next endeavor, I'm going to briefly cover the Willie Lynch letters and why those are more important than Jim Crow. Right on. Uh, uh, I'm going to talk about how white people have always known that black people were not the same. We're going to talk about we're strange Negroes, okay? If your people are slaves, descendant of slaves who were brought here, you are considered a strange Negro. And that is a fact. However, I don't tire or bore of you. I just think that I like to get ahead of tomorrow. Who knows how this judge ruled on this decision? We shall see. I thank everybody for praying for a young brother. They attempt to mock the Most High, but it's impossible. However, y'all, it has been an honor. And we will do another one of these very, very soon because I'm excited. I'm very excited. White Heaven, Great White Hope, Black Despair. And part 2 will be about the stuff that I just said. It's going to be about sharecropping. It's going to be about what the hell, the Dust Bowl, right on, how that all worked out, you see? And then we're going to really break into the Rockefeller and really talk about that and eugenics. And we just gotta everything's gonna slowly come together. Now I told you, today's video, all the information, all that stuff, all that information, they're their own separate fist. So these things have been bombarding Black people for a long time. Love y'all. Y'all take it easy. No.